Hello and welcome to Words of the Wild, a podcast brought to you by the Scottish Wildlife Trust. My name is Ed. As usual, I am joined by my fantastic colleague and co-host.
Hello everyone, I'm Rachel. Today, Ed, what have we got planned?
Well, today we are looking at some of our projects and some of our partnerships as well. So at the Trust, we work on a lot of large-scale change through some really collaborative and quite pioneering initiatives that really are working to restore ecosystems, both on land and at sea. We're going to be hearing from some of the colleagues that are doing just that, really. So the first feature for this episode is with our Riverwoods project team. So we heard from Riverwoods back in season 1, but as a reminder, Riverwoods is a partnership project that is aiming to create this network of thriving river woodlands and healthy river ecosystems all across Scotland. So who are we going to be hearing from?
We are going to be hearing from Ruth Oxborough, who is Riverwoods Communications and Advocacy Officer. And we're also going to be hearing from Phil from the Spey Catchment Initiative, which is one of Riverwoods' project partners.
Well, thank you very much for chatting today, Ruth. So you're part of the Riverwoods team, and we featured Riverwoods in our first series of Words of the Wild. So the first question really is, what's new? What's happening this time around? What's changed for the project?
Yeah, so the last time we spoke about Riverwoods on the podcast, we'd just come out of the development phase, which was a year-long evidence gathering phase where we were working with our partners to come up with a strategic plan for the project. We have now moved into the delivery phase. This started in October of 2024 and is going to be running until June 2028. And that's thanks to funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and National Lottery players. The delivery phase is going to be on-the-ground practical delivery of this strategic plan, which was put together as part of the development phase.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting shift, isn't it, from kind of where we were last time we spoke was the kind of planning stage, I guess, and getting things lined up, and now we're at the kind of doing stage, which is quite an exciting place to be. So one of the things we talked about was the Blueprint project, and I've heard that quite a lot, but could you just tell us a bit more about what that actually involves?
Yes, so the Blueprint project is the core of the Riverwoods initiative work at the moment. It is practical, on-the-ground delivery to create a blueprint for river woodland restoration and creation across Scotland. We're working with our partners, Fisheries Management Scotland, Woodland Trust Scotland, Buglife, the Tweed Forum, Kyle of Sutherland Rivers Trust and the Spey Catchment Initiative, who you're going to hear from later. So the Blueprint project is going to be working across 8 different work streams to demonstrate practical on-the-ground tree planting, and at catchment scale we'll be doing community engagement work to bring catchment communities along with us on this journey to river woodland restoration and creation, creating a digital centre for excellence. This is going to be a space where we share best practice and guidance. We've got the development grant, which will create a pipeline of new projects which partners or prospective partners can carry on after the completion of the Blueprint project, as well as formalising monitoring and evaluation frameworks, again, as part of this Blueprint, which will lay the groundwork for other projects in the future.
It's really exciting. I really like the idea of kind of creating a showcase that is there to kind of inspire, but then also kind of enable. So that's kind of where the development grant comes in, right? So that's quite an interesting part of the project. It supports community groups and individuals to get involved. So what was the thinking behind that grant, really?
So during the development phase, we found that there was gap in funding for the scoping and planning of river woodland development plans. And this was acting as a real barrier for local organisations getting involved in work like this. And the start of projects are really important. It gives an opportunity to engage with local communities and landowners. It makes sure, the right trees are in the right place. It enables further studies to be done on species that currently live in the area and the wider impacts of planting on a catchment scale. So it's a really crucial part of a project to ensure that, when you get to the end of the planting, everything is successful. So the development grant has been created to help with this. It's a £200,000 fund for community groups, ENGOs, charities to apply for to help with the scoping process. Funding can go towards as I say, engagement work, it can be surveys, and more analysis of the site. This will obviously depend on the scale of the project or the location. Yeah, it's really to help consolidate all of that before you get into the more practical delivery aspect of a project.
So we've talked a bit about, in the first series of Words of the Wild, we talked about why riparian habitat is so important, and by extension riparian restoration, as well as the funding and the support work through things like the development grant. What practical action is happening through Riverwoods?
As part of the Blueprint project, we are working with 3 demonstration areas. So this is the Tweed Forum, the Carl of Sutherland Rivers Trust and the Spey Catchment Initiative to deliver on the ground practical river woodland creation and restoration. So as part of the Blueprint project, we will be restoring up at least 150 hectares of riparian woodland, as well as planting at least 110,000 trees. So it's a really key part of the project. We're working closely with landowners and delivery partners via these partner organisations of ours to make sure that this is all delivered successfully, and then we can take learnings from this into the development of this wider blueprint for river woodland restoration that we are working on and will end up with once the project has come to an end. So we're hoping that this will really inspire and encourage other projects throughout Scotland to take on this catchment scale restoration work.
I love this idea of creating kind of examples that are there to inspire really and give people some ideas of where they can start. And I think what I'm finding, the more that we've talked about Riverwoods and the kind of blueprint phase of the project, is that actually it's considered so much stuff. It's got the stuff that's going to inspire people, and then once they feel suitably inspired, they can then go and apply to the development grant. It's got all of the support, and then it will have this digital centre for excellence as well. So it's really, really interesting. I love this kind of idea of actually supporting people along the way to restore riparian habitat in their area. So it's fascinating. The last question here is about partners. I mean, we've talked about a few of them. Are there any that you wanted to mention in particular?
Absolutely. So as we've discussed, the Blueprint project is currently sitting at the core of the Riverwoods Initiative work. This is bringing together a collaboration of organisations and individuals that are like-minded and working towards restoring Scotland's river woodland ecosystems and protecting them for future generations of people and wildlife. So currently we have 15 Riverwoods partners and counting, which is really exciting. And these obviously include our Blueprint project delivery partners, as well as others, including the Forth Rivers Trust, Nature Scot, European Nature Trust, to name a few. As I said, this is a really important part of what we're working on at the moment.
Ruth, this has been fascinating. Thank you very much for chatting. Catch up with you soon.
Thank you.
So Phil, you work for the Spey Catchment Initiatives, who are one of the Riverwoods project partners. Could you just tell us a bit about some of the work that you do?
Great. Well, thanks for coming to Speyside, Ed. SCI, Spey Catchment Initiative, we were established back in 2010, so that's almost 15 years ago. And we're now an independent SCIO since 2022. We're a really small team. Our chief executive and founder, Roger, and 2.5 project officers and half a comms officer, but we're small. But over the years, we've delivered a huge range of projects with land managers and farmers, from in river works to lots of riparian woodland, and woodland is certainly an increasing focus for us. I guess initially, Spey Catchment Initiative, we were doing projects that had really keen partners to work with us, and now we're being perhaps a little bit more strategic, focusing on the areas of the catchment that really need our help most. So yeah, it's focusing on those areas that wouldn't happen without our intervention. But it's probably worth also saying that we don't need to do all of it. So the Spey catchment is huge, and will only directly deliver projects that landowners, they wouldn't be able to do without us. So a fair bit of our work is actually influencing others to add that bit of riparian woodland to their scheme, to go that extra mile or add that bit of more value in what they're doing. But there are others doing great work in the catchment too. We're just trying to influence what they do to try and improve it, and then delivering the bits directly that they wouldn't do themselves.
It's a really important kind of niche that you're fulfilling there. It's an interesting position to be in, really. So I mentioned earlier that you're one of the Riverwoods program partners. How have you been involved in that, and how has it kind of supported the development or supported your work?
Riverwoods is great because I think there's a lot of little organisations like us dotted over Scotland, which is fabulous. There's so many sister organisations across the country doing equally great work, but there is a real danger that in our sort of small sector, and we're all very busy, that we end up, if you'll excuse the water metaphor, we're all paddling our own canoes rather too much. And I think what's great about Riverwoods is that it helps us all share and network better. And, Riverwoods is able to, the central team of Riverwoods is not only able to coordinate and get us all talking to each other better, but also able to develop best practice and share best practice in a way that, we just don't have time for. We'd love to spend more time doing that sort of big piece, influencing others at government level and developing best practice, but we don't. And I think I speak for all of the small charities like us, there just isn't enough time to go around. So I think Riverwoods has an amazingly important role to help develop best practice and get us all talking together much better. And we're also hugely grateful that we've been selected as one of the blueprint demonstration sites as well for Riverwoods, which is supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and that's been super helpful, particularly in helping us scope and develop our future projects, the next pipeline of projects.
It's really interesting that this kind of work is happening, it's out there, but Riverwoods kind of helps connect the dots in a way.
Absolutely,
There's all these great organisations doing fantastic stuff in these beautiful areas as well. We were talking earlier, and you've kind of mentioned already, but we've talked a bit about some of the work that you do with local farmers and local landowners. Can you just tell us a bit more about that? Because that's something that's really interesting.
The truth is that we only get to achieve anything with the support from the folk that actually live on and manage the land. So, our work crucially needs to help upland farmers and estate managers. If those who actually live on and manage the land don't see any benefit from what we're proposing, then it's really likely the wrong idea and time to go back to the drawing board and think again. So upland farmers have a really, really tough life. I think, they work massively long hours in all weathers. No one's going to help them look after their stock when they're not feeling great that day. But I think it's these incredibly busy people may be forgiven for thinking that too many folk like us are knocking on their doors, telling them what they ought to be doing and telling them how to manage their land. So if we're going to achieve anything, it's really vital that we listen to the people who have often worked that ground for generations. Our ideas must deliver some benefit for the farm and for the farm enterprise if they're going to happen and if they're going to have lasting benefit. I've learned so much in this job from those people, trying to find solutions that will help farmers through restoring lost riparian woodland. And when you hit on a solution that works for the farm and really works for the nature restoration objectives that we're trying to lead on, well, that's what it's all about, and that's why I get up every day. It's tremendous work.
And I can imagine with the joint kind of climate and biodiversity crises that we're facing at the moment, it's not an easy time to be in conservation. What are some of the key challenges that you're facing right now?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think first and foremost, if we think about the river that we're sitting by right now, Ed, the main Spey. We're faced, as we all know, with the twin challenges of a biodiversity crisis and a climate crisis at the same time. So, right now, this year, we've had, one of the driest springs on record. So we're looking at low water levels here today, low water levels and warm water. And that's obviously in everybody's mind at present, but we're going to get more of these events. It's not going to be unusual. At the same time, we're going to have flooding, and so these extreme events are part of our daily work and a real challenge for us practically, but it's absolutely a challenge for everything that lives in and by the river. So that's one thing. As I would say, the second would be technical challenges. That establishing trees, doing riverwood stuff in riparian areas, some people think it's easy, but it kind of isn't. Excluding stock around rivers isn't always easy with varying flows and water gates and so on. We have wild grazers, of course. All grazing animals want to be down by the water. And then, so there's plenty of things to eat your trees, from deer to rabbits to hares and voles. Flooding can be a huge issue as a technical challenge, and keeping fences up and where we need them, tubes. And that's before we think about the issues that all foresters face with sort of weed competition, incredibly dry springs and so on. So, there's a lot of technical challenges, to actually restore riparian woodland right by the water's edge. It's actually much more difficult than a lot of folk might realise. So that's number two, I suppose. So yeah, number one was low and warm water. Two would be the technical challenges of actually making it happen. And I think thirdly, perhaps the slow pace and uncertainty around agricultural reform and support and funding for the biodiversity. I mean, there's, as there's quite significant challenges and changes afoot for the way that agriculture is funded in Scotland, and that slow pace of change and uncertainty. All businesses need a bit of stability to plan properly for the future, and that the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty around about that has caused some inertia. So those are the sort of three key challenges, I suppose. But it is a great job. We think we're doing something that's really important and worthwhile, and loads of our partners think that too. We get to work in a beautiful landscape and work with some amazing people that live here. So no one said it would be easy, but I think we're pretty lucky to find ourselves doing what we do.
Absolutely. What a message to end on. This has been brilliant. Thank you for chatting, and thank you for bringing me to this fantastic spot, Phil. It's been really, really interesting. Thank you very much.
Nice said. Thanks.
So that was Ruth and Phil. Thank you very much for coming along. Riverwoods is, as you can probably have heard, it's such a fantastic project. And what I really liked, one of kind of Phil's points, we are quite often in conservation, working in silos or peddling our own canoes, as he mentioned, which I really liked. And I think Riverwoods sounds such a fantastic way to help connect those dots and kind of bridge those gaps and bring people together who are doing really similar things, and I guess kind of scale it up, really. It sounds absolutely fantastic. So what was it like, Ed, recording with Ruth and Phil?
Yeah, I mean, we ended up at two very different spots, really. So I recorded with Ruth on the Water of Leith, which was a very urban site. There was people going past on their bikes and walking their dogs, and there was an ambulance went past at one point, so that made for some interesting recording. The sirens blaring in the background. But the recording with Phil was then we went and sat on the bank of the River Spey. Two completely different riparian locations, but both equally important. They were completely almost worlds apart, one being really, really urban and one being far more rural. But they were so fantastic, and you can really, having spoken to both Ruth and Phil, really feel the connection between the two and just how important those habitats are. So we should also say that Ruth mentioned the Riverwoods Development Grant. That has now been awarded, so all of the recipients are available on the Riverwoods website. So if you'd like to see which projects were successful, go and check them out. There's some absolutely fantastic work that is available through those projects, or happening through those projects. So for our next feature, we are going to be talking about saving Scotland's red squirrels. I'm really, really excited about this one. Rachel, tell us all about it.
I had the pleasure of travelling to the bonny banks of Loch Lomond to hear from one of our Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels monitoring and control officers who's been working in partnership with the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority. So if you don't know, Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels is a partnership project led by the Trust that, as you can probably guess, is looking to save our red squirrels, make sure that they're part of our native wildlife here in Scotland. As we know, red squirrels have experienced, unfortunately, population declines primarily due to the competition with invasive non-native greys. So Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels has been working really hard to kind of halt that decline of reds. through landscape scale kind of grey squirrel control. So I travelled to Balloch in Loch Lomond, like I said, to hear from one of our monitoring and control officers who's doing just that, and they're live trapping on the islands in Loch Lomond, which is a really kind of unique thing. So it was a perfect autumnal day. I didn't actually see any red squirrels when I was there, but there was plenty of lovely autumn colours, and we could hear the waves lapping and lots of dogs kind of rustling about in the leaves, which is quite nice. So yeah, here we are for our Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels feature.
So I'm a monitoring and control officer, part of the Highland Line, and I'm covering Argyll and Trossachs and Stirlingshire. It's a pretty big area that I'm covering, but it's part of the Highland Line, and it's a pretty big area, but it's kind of narrowed down and concentrated along the border where we've got red and grey squirrels. So pretty much from Gairlochhead in the west up to Callander east, and then my colleagues take over from there. As my role, the title gives away, I do some squirrel monitoring. So that's an ongoing work of figuring out where we've got breeding populations of red and grey squirrels. Both where they're breeding, but also working on detecting pioneer individuals. So we've got red squirrels moving further south towards Glasgow, identifying where we've got grey squirrels moving further north. So alongside monitoring, I also organise and do grey squirrel removal where they pose a threat to red squirrel populations and where they're spreading further north into the Highlands.
So what's the significance of the Highland Line for red squirrels then?
So the Highland Line, it's significant because it marks the border between red and grey squirrel populations. This is not a constant border. It has been fluctuating historically, where we used to have grey squirrels present north of the Highland Line. But this is where the red and grey squirrels meet together today. So this is where the reds can be outcompeted by their larger invasive relative and potentially also come in contact with the squirrel pox virus. The Highland Line is one of the places in Scotland that has been identified as a priority for red squirrel conservation. It's where we're focusing our work to protect red populations, but also prevent the spread of grey squirrels into the Highlands. And we're aiming to hold this line and push it further south eventually, down towards Perth, for example, but also prevent incursion north to make sure that no greys gets into the area where we work in Aberdeen.
So why has trapping on the islands been significant?
They're live capturing traps, so we release any bycatch and dispatch greys. But through the grey squirrel control that's been done up until today, both by Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels, but also local landowners, members of the public and volunteers, and significantly also the return of the pine marten, red squirrels have been making a comeback along Loch Lomond and even south of the Highland Line. So they've been repopulating the shores of Loch Lomond. However, in the middle of that region, and in this region we've got several islands with beautiful, perfect squirrel habitats, ancient woodland and a variety of tree species. And some of these islands are full of grey squirrels, while the shoreline is then grey squirrel free. There has been observations of grey squirrels swimming between the islands and mainland. This has been observed in other places in the UK as well, so Anglesey is another example, where grey squirrels have been swimming between mainland and an island. So they're pretty strong swimmers, so these populations that we've got on Loch Lomond could be a significant source of grey squirrels returning and repopulating the areas of Loch Lomond where we've now got healthy populations of red squirrels. The earliest record that I've come across of grey squirrels on these islands dates back to 1992 on Inchcruin, so one of the islands in the middle, but it is quite hard to estimate how long they've actually been there. They've obviously been doing pretty well and they've bred a lot. We've found this out through trapping. We've had pretty dense populations of greys out there.
I had absolutely no idea that squirrels could swim. Definitely a new one for me. So the project is more involved than just setting traps. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the other work that goes into the process?
So A crucial part of our work involves investigating and continuously figuring out where in the landscape we've got both species. So monitoring is done for a number of reasons. Part of it is allocating and focusing our resources. Trapping takes up a large part of our time, so we do depend on partner organisations, volunteers and members of the public to help us out with this. But through monitoring, we can work out where in the landscape we can actually make a difference and where we can have a positive impact on red squirrel populations. We also need to focus our work where we can be confident that the grey squirrels that we do remove are not quickly replaced by new ones, or that we can't keep on top of it. So it's really important to follow up trapping with further monitoring. Coming back to the islands again, this is the ideal place where we can see a near, like in time, an end to grey squirrel control, because we are confident that we can fully remove them. Because they are islands, so it would only be swimming squirrels that could get back out there, and also the shorelines closest to these islands are mostly populated by red squirrels and pine martens. But again, this is an ongoing work. We'll need to follow it up with monitoring and making sure that all the greys are gone and not swimming back out.
What are some of the challenges of trapping in a unique location like these islands?
The main challenge is maybe an obvious one, but it's getting out there with a boat. The project doesn't have a boat. We don't have a boat ourselves, so we've been relying on partner organisations to help us out with that. Also, Loch Lomond is a pretty big loch, so there's a lot of travelling times getting from Balloch up to the islands in the middle, or from Luss. So it takes up a lot of time just getting out there, and then we've had to drop people off at different drop-off sites on the island, so it's been quite time consuming just getting out there. There is no risk of trapping red squirrels out there. Don't have any records at the moment of red squirrels present on any islands. We've found that through the trapping as well. If there is both species present, then we tend to get them in the traps. But even though there is no risk of trapping reds, we follow a strict protocol where we check them twice a day. Yeah, having to take that into account with the boat going to different places, and we have to be at the trapping sites twice a day. Yeah, we've been following this protocol strictly because we're also obviously to ensure welfare of the grey squirrels, to avoid them sitting in the traps for too long. We've been lucky to have had help from Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park. Their patrol boat has been significant in getting us out there, and yeah, they've been a crucial part of just making it possible to get started on this project. Another thing is the terrain out there. As I mentioned, it's really beautiful habitats, and the squirrels love it and they thrive out there, but it is pretty dense vegetation, and we've had to do a lot of off-path walking, so we've been getting our steps up out there. So that's been quite challenging, just working there. And the weather could be a challenge, but the national park staff, they've been making sure that they keep us safe. But actually, when we were out there in May, June, I think we probably had the nicest spring in ages. So SPF most days, and I think we just had a couple of days of rain, but it was beautiful weather when we
That's pretty perfect. Was there lots of midges?
No.
Oh,
no,
good.
just
That's
ticks.
a perfect day then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's very good. How many, just out of curiosity, how many islands are there in kind of the Loch Lomond area, do you know?
There's like 8 big islands. We're talking like 60 hectares plus. Okay. And then there is some smaller islands in between those islands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So if it's possible to tell at this stage, has the trapping been successful?
Yeah, it's quite difficult to say right now to kind of measure the impact that we've had through continuous trapping and figuring out how many individuals there are left. That's our only way of really making sure that we are successful. I mean, it's been a big success even just getting out there and getting started on this project, but it is a long-term aim that we're going for, and that is completely removing squirrels. So down the line, we're hoping to set up monitoring and confirming that we have removed all of them. And we do focus on red squirrel conservation, so we'll be monitoring the shorelines closest to these islands, making sure that the reds are doing well, and hopefully one day some red squirrels might go for a swim and repopulate the islands. There has been records of red squirrels on Inchcaigh Loch in 2021 and 2022, but there's no evidence of them breeding or still being on that island. Yeah. But it gives us a bit of hope that they might go out there on their own. Mm-hmm. Many of these islands are triple SIs, so they're really important sites for breeding populations of birds. Unfortunately, we don't have data to measure the impact on these populations, but we would expect removing an invasive mammal from these islands that it will have a beneficial effect on remaining wildlife.
Yeah. It must be quite, I don't know, a cool experience to go to an island that, it's not man-made, there's not any, it's just wild. I think that must be quite a unique experience, eh?
Yeah, it is pretty wild, and just like the blaeberries out there, it's habitats that you don't really see on the rest of, within this area on the mainland. So it's kind of captured some really nice habitats, and wood ants on one of the islands. They were absolutely everywhere, which you don't really come across that much on the mainland.
Unique.
Yeah.
So that was our trip to hear from one of our monitoring control officers in Balloch. It was fantastic to hear. Like I say, it's quite, as you can probably have heard, it's quite a unique thing to be going out to these islands that are quite remote and quite wild, and having to, do some really kind of hard trapping where you're continually having to go and check them. So yeah, what a task that they've got on their hands, but it was absolutely fantastic to hear more about it. And I still can't believe squirrels can swim. And some of those islands are, a good fair distance. I was quite shocked by that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to find out more about saving Scotland's red squirrels, we did feature them in our first season back in episode 7. So go and take a listen. There's lots of information in there about the project, as well as red squirrels. Also have a listen to the Casterham and Wood feature. Red squirrels are well known to be hanging out in that kind of area. So go and check that out for more information. And of course, a huge thank you to the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority for all of their help and support in the island trapping that our Saving Scotland's Red Squirrels team have been working on.
So next up, for our Day in the Life segment this episode, we are going to be chatting with Anne Campbell, who's our Crofting Officer for the Ben Mor Coigach and sort of surrounding area. So if you're not sure what crofting is, it's essentially a kind of way of owning, renting and using land in Scotland. So crofting traditionally focuses on things like livestock rearing and arable crops and grass cropping. And essentially it's a traditional and kind of low intensity management of land to support our species and habitats, which makes the Highlands and Islands, a really unique place. And also the social and kind of economic and cultural impacts of crofting really strengthen communities in the Highlands and Islands. So yeah, we're going to have a little chat with Anne to hear more.
Well, Anne, thank you very much for joining us today. The first question really I've got for you is about your role. Could you just tell us a bit about what it is that you do and what your role entails?
I'm the Crofting Officer for Ben Mor Coigach Reserve, and also for the wider Coll area. However, there are not many crofts in the wider Coll area. It's mostly on Ben Mor Coigach. I've been in the same sort of role for quite a number of years. I was with the Coigach and Asset Living Landscape Partnership Scheme, and then it's been continued by the Wildlife Trust. And when budget allows, I have been able to offer training and advice and get professional advisors here to help crofters to improve their crofts, either for wildlife or for better pasture And I suppose that's part of my main role, is to work with the crofters and by following the principles of the Wildlife Trust. The main projects I have are deer management, woodland planting or regeneration of woodland, and peatland restoration. And I'm writing a sustainable crofting development plan. So these are the main aspects of it.
So it sounds like there's a lot going on there. For those who might not be aware, what is a croft?
They're very small, particularly in this area. I mean, some crofts can only be, about a hectare. In other areas, they're much larger than that. They can be up to 50 hectares. But it's like a small holding. And it usually will have some in by agricultural land that in the past was cultivated, but now there's just little pockets of cultivation here, and it's mostly used for rough pasture. And other, people have different. You may have different businesses from it. They'll be self-employed, or they have little tourist business like B&B or self-catering, or some people have one crofter has turned their croft into a campsite. So it's all a variety of things. But that is a croft, and with the croft comes a share in the common grazings.
Ah, okay. So it's the common grazings that kind of tie everyone together. That's interesting.
Yeah. The common grazing is, it's a common land. It's shared between all of the people in the township, all the crofters in the township. And it's similar to upland farming in Wales and Yorkshire, where, they share the common land as well.
What is your favourite thing about working in the really rugged Northwest Highlands?
Well, I suppose just that. It's just the scenery, really, and you think in a way nothing happens here, but it's so small, but it's changing. The weather changes all the time. The seasons, that's it's so interesting. You can have no 2 days in a week the same. And I suppose it's the same for my role as well, that you can be working with Woodland Trust one day, the peatland restoration people the next day, advising somebody on who has cows on how to, using their collarless, no fence collars, where you can control cattle by an app on your phone, which has proved to be really successful, and lots of conservationists have used it. With the Woodland Trust use the fenceless collars for conservation grazing of their various properties.
Yeah, it's a clever bit of kit. Why is working with crofters important?
There are about 30 crofts on here, not all of them tenanted. Some are owner occupiers, but mostly so. The Wildlife Trust have responsibility for this area, and they manage this land, and with it comes these tenants. So it's really important, I think, for me to sort of convey to the crofters what the Wildlife Trust is about, and the other way around, that what's and with this crofting development plan, I hope to incentivise crofters to mitigate against climate change and improve biodiversity.
Yeah, it's important stuff. That's it's pretty significant when it comes to farming and working with local landowners. Do you have a favourite place to go to connect with nature?
Well, yeah, probably. I've got several favourite places, but probably one of the best is Achonenber Beach. And it's just a quite secluded, small beach that not everybody knows about. And so it's just a really beautiful, peaceful place.
Sounds perfect. I'll have to make a trip up there at some point. We talked about this earlier, that there's not necessarily, every day is different, but what does a typical day look like for you, really?
Like most people, there's the emails to deal with, and that, there's the normal admin that comes with your job. But every day I go out somewhere and to either meet with somebody or sometimes to go on trainings myself. But every day I'll go out somewhere to meet somebody to discuss what kind of training they would like to see here. And then, of course, you sometimes just bump into somebody in the local shop or whatever, and you end up talking about, freshwater ecology and riparian health and, all sorts of things.
What are some of the key challenges that you're facing in your role at the minute?
Well, again, there's always the financial side of things that, for instance, the woodland planting that we're trying to do is the kind of financial support that you get hasn't really kept up with the increase in material and labour as well. All sorts. There was a huge kind of increase after COVID, or during COVID, I suppose it all happened, that lots of materials weren't available. So everything goes up and up and up, and it's never really come back down to that kind of level. And I would still say that some supplies for materials there's still a shortage, these many years later. So yeah, the financial side of things is always challenging. And just trying to speak to people, getting people on board, the local crofters, that it's just trying to get that message across why biodiversity is important. And I don't know if everybody understands that all the time. So yeah, these are the challenges, I think.
What is your favourite time of year to be out and about?
Well, spring. I do. I mean, in a spring, and as I said earlier, that how quickly things can change. Just, all these sort of summer visitors arriving, the birds, and yeah, it's definitely spring when the trees are coming into leaf and everything's turning green from a drab brown and grey all winter, and the winter can sometimes feel quite long, and then you get a few days of sunshine in spring, and it lifts your spirits substantially.
That's been really interesting, Anne. Thank you very much for talking.
Okay.
So that was Anne Campbell, our Crofting Officer here at the Trust, as well as working on the wider Coigach and Assynt living landscape area, which you might have heard Anne refer to there as CALL, C-A-L-L, Coigach and Assynt living landscape. A huge thanks to Anne for spending some time having a chat there. It's a fantastic part of the world. I was really lucky to go up to Ben Mor Coigach last year, recording for season 1, but it's just a beautiful part of the world, and I can really relate to what Anne says about spring being one of her favourite times of year. It's such an incredible place to be working. So again, huge thanks to Anne for having a chat there. As always, a huge thank you for listening to Words of the Wild. If you would like to get in touch, if you've got questions or comments or thoughts, or just you'd like to find out more, please do drop us an email. You can get in touch at communications@scottishwildlifetrust.org.uk. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a question that you'd like us to answer, just drop us a line and we'll see what we can do. What are we talking about next episode, Rachel?
So we are going to be having a bit of a policy and advocacy focus. Don't be too scared. We are going to break it down, make it fun. And we're also going to hear it from our Living Seas team to hear what they've been getting up to as well.
Sounds like exciting stuff. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you can join us next time for more Words of the Wild. We hope that you've enjoyed listening to our podcast today. If you'd like to receive more regular updates on our work, including a subscription to our magazine, free access to our visitor centres, and invitations to exclusive events, please consider joining the Scottish Wildlife Trust as a member. You can find out how by visiting scottishwildlifetrust.org.uk/join.